So hello, continuing our series of interviews with people with specific expertise in areas of great interest to people in business. Today, I'm very pleased to say that I'm joined by Barbara Hodgson from Your Business Matters. So Your Business Matters work with small and medium-sized businesses to really help them get to the place they want to be. So very complementary to what we do here at Action Coach. And in particular, we're going to be talking this morning about networking, and obviously networking being very much online at the moment, but also, of course, hopefully at some point in the future, we'll get back into face-to-face networking again as well. So Barbara, good morning.
Morning, Rupert. How are you this morning?
Very well, thank you. Very well. Do you want to explain a little bit more in detail about what Your Business Matters does, and then we'll start to talk about networking as well?
Yeah, Your Business Matters provides practical, hands-on support to help business owners grow their business. So we're not business coaches like yourself, Rupert. Instead, we help through the seminars and the courses that we run, and we also run connection events. And they either are regular monthly events, such as the Connections Club in the Business Room, or we host larger events for people to connect with each other.
Okay. And then I know historically you ran Women in Business. I think you ran 8 Women in Businesses across the region as well.
I'm thinking of them. I think I had 9 groups. Yeah, 9 groups across Leicestershire, Northamptonshire, and then up in Oakham and Stamford as well, which were fantastic. And it was a great 12 years, and I certainly have learned a lot. And I'm very proud of the fact that I've helped a lot of businesses grow their business. And in fact, some of them have attributed that business success to belonging to one of my groups. And that is a fantastic compliment to pay anybody. So I'm really proud of that.
No, good. Absolutely. Absolutely. So how would you define networking? That needs to be the first question for this conversation, doesn't it?
Well, networking for me it's an investment in your business, that's for sure. But it's about building long-term relationships so that those people really understand your business, understand what kinds of customers that you're looking for. And when they see that opportunity, they recognize it and they're able to connect you. So big investment and really about long-term relationships. And if I think about some of the people that have been on a journey with me through business, many of them have been with me for over 7 years, some for 11, some for 12 years. And it's been amazing to see their relationships strengthen and their business grow, because networking should be a continuous process. And as the years go by, that amount of business that you're past should increase.
So very much a referrals-based relationship, I think is what you're saying.
Referrals, but also connections, about third-party contacts. And that's certainly what I tend to focus when I look at networking, is looking at businesses that can work together strategically and pass that business between them, but remembering it to be genuine and authentic as well.
Yeah. So what sort of people are attracted to networking? What sort of people, actually it shouldn't be attracted, should it? What sort of people should be networking is the actual question.
Well, in terms of size of business, I think networking suits small to medium-sized businesses. I think that's the kinds of businesses that you see generally. But literally any business can network. They just have to understand who makes a good partner for them. And that investment in networking and word-of-mouth marketing is really cost-effective. And it's, who you're going to talk to. Unlike, say, putting an advert in a magazine, not that I'm against that works as well, but every single person that you talk to, you can follow up with everybody and you can explain about your business in detail. And I think for some businesses, which are quite complex businesses to understand, actually networking is an added advantage because of that conversation, because the aim is to build the relationships and exchange information. So you can ask lots of questions and really, drill down to who is their ideal customer. So I'm a marketing business. I don't just need customers for marketing, but these are the kinds of customers that I want to have and I want to connect with.
I suppose that then takes you down the route of which networking events you should be looking to attend as well.
I think it's a very personal choice, and we certainly say to people that they should look at potentially 2 different kinds. So to join a membership group, one or two, depending on what your budget is, but also do some informal networking as well, because each of those will bring different advantages and different opportunities. In terms of the events, you know, you've got some which are very informal, and when we're face to face, it's very much drop in, have a cup of tea, you know, talk to whoever's within the room. And then you've got other groups which are much, much more structured. And some people will, you know, so structured, I mean, they've got a chair, they've got a very clear agenda. The meeting is run by one person. And I think some of it will depend upon what you like and what you feel comfortable with. But the combination, if people can do a mixture of those types of networking, they usually do complement each other.
Yeah. And what's the benefits of each then? So you've got the structured versus the informal. I could see that the informal would be probably much more comfortable to be as part of that group. But what are the benefits of each type of networking event?
Well, I think within an informal group, that the great delight of that is that you never know, you know, who you're going to meet. But, you know, if it's a drop-in, so you get different characters, get different businesses within it. It can be quite exciting. But for a first-time networker, it can feel extremely daunting, because, you know, you're going to have to do that introduction to that other person. Whereas in structured networking, it's likely that introduction is going to be done for you. With structured networking, it usually provides a much more confident basis for somebody to enter the room. There's a clear agenda, so people know what to expect. And I would have thought in most cases, people know who is going to be in the room. So they can do a little bit of research before they get there, so they know. And I always advocate people, whether you're doing informal or structured networking, you know, that you set yourself some objectives about what you're looking for, either what you're looking for, or just some easy ones. Like if it's informal, maybe you decide that you want to meet just 3 new businesses, and that stops you just staying with the same person. Because with formal networking, you can get a bit stuck, can't you? You can get stuck with a group of people. It could be quite hard to move on and meet another set of people. Or if the whole room knows each other, it can be quite cliquey as well, because people stay with the people that they know.
Yeah.
So that answers fully your question, Rupert.
Yeah, well, I suppose actually you hit on an interesting part, because you started talking about the preparation for the meeting as well. So what people should be doing before they go into the meeting. There's also, of course, how they should be behaving and what they should be looking to do during the event. Now, you mentioned there that they probably want to move around a few groups and make 3 introductions during the session, or whatever the target they've set themselves. And then, of course, follow-up. What about follow-up after a networking meeting?
Well, obviously, whatever you decide and you give to somebody, you need to follow up on it. So if you've arranged to meet them outside of that networking meeting for an informal get to know you session better, not to sell, then you need to make sure that you actually get on and do that. I think thanking people for once you've met them is really important. But I think there's also that pendulum that swings where people chase. So they put you on their newsletter, you know, they're on your heels. Networking should be a very natural process, and it should be, I'm going to use the word paced. It shouldn't be that hunger sell. It's got to be that slow, that build up of a relationship. But there are lots of things you can do. I know you talked about the preparation side, and we did touch on it, Rupert, but there is lots of things you can do before you even get into that room. You know, set yourself some objectives, think about how you're going to introduce yourself, find out how that meeting is going to be run, so there's no big surprises. So whether it's informal or a structured event, you can find out, you know, who's going to be there, ask for an attendance list if the organizer's got one. You can decide some businesses that you perhaps want to be connected to. So you could ask to be introduced to those businesses. And the other thing I'm going to say for both events as well is you've got to start to think confidently about yourself and your business. I think networking can be quite a daunting affair for any business, even the person that's done it for years and years. You know, if you go to an informal event or it's a new event to you, walking into that room with that new group of people, you know, it can make your stomach churn.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Of this, you have to think confidently. You have to talk yourself up. And actually, running the Women in Business Network, one of the things I always said I think it tends to more of a female audience, but women tend to put themselves down as well. So they think, oh, I'm only a little VA, I'm only a little this, I've only got a little company doing whatever. I think you've got to have an internal big yourself up, and you've got to talk and feel confident about your business. So I think before you step into the room, there's a lot of inner talking that needs to happen before you even get there.
Yeah, and I suppose also I find it's knowing what my introduction, particularly when you're meeting face to face, it's knowing what's the first. It's almost just the first two lines that you're going to say when you join a group. So I mean, the first thing you need to obviously ask is can I join your group? Because if it's a closed group, and then the second thing is what's the first thing you're going to say? What's your introduction? I heard a story actually. Edward Heath, the Tory Prime Minister in the 70s, I think it was, but apparently he was an absolute genius when it came to working a networking room. And he always, bear in mind who he was, ex-Prime Minister, but he always introduced himself as, hello, I'm Edward Heath, which it's almost a wasted statement, isn't it? But it just puts people at ease.
Absolutely. And I think I think sometimes we get caught up in internal nerves before we get there. So I think, yes, the more you can prepare before you get into the room, the better it is. And to think that confident thinking about yourself and what you do, as you said, in a nutshell, in some ways, is important, because what you don't want to do is to go in, introduce yourself and tell your whole life story in the first 2 to 3 minutes. And it is the old adage, we've got, 2 ears, 1 mouth, we have to use them proportionately. So I think that's lovely, Rupert, that short introduction, but then I think it's about then being very open and asking questions about the other person. Yeah. My children tell me that I'm a very nosy person, and I like to say it's curiosity, but it's about being curious about people and what they do so that you learn about them. And that really turns it into a networking event and not a selling event.
Yes, absolutely. Now, also, you touched on you're doing your pitch, your 45 seconds, your 1 minute about what your business does. Do you have any tips for people as to how they should structure their pitch, what they need to say?
When you think about the minute, if it's a formal event, you've got to stand up and do a minute. I always think it's really good to introduce yourself and say your first name twice. So I'm Barbara Hodgson from Your Business Matters.
I like that. Yep.
And then the James Bond moment. Yeah. And you perhaps to give them a little bit of context in terms of then what you're going to lead into what you're looking for this month. So it could be something you've been doing within the month, so a little bit of an update about your business, but it should only be for about 40 seconds. So very short. It could be, excuse me, it could be giving somebody giving a testimonial. So somebody sent you in a testimonial. You can perhaps read that, remembering it has to be short and sweet, can't be a huge thing. It could be showing something that you have worked on that month. So if you're a graphic designer, perhaps you're going to show them a piece of work that you've done and talk about that. Or a photographer's another lovely one to show you photographs. They all speak volumes. And then to say what you're looking for and to be as specific as possible in that. And now people really struggle with that word, being specific, because often they'll say, but Barbara, I can sell my product or service to a whole array of people. Well, that's absolutely fine. But why not just pick a small segment, because the smaller and more specific you are, the more it's likely that those people that are listening to that pitch might be able to think of somebody that they could connect you to. That's one of the hardest and most challenging things for all of us. We all get carried away, and when you go to a networking meeting, you'd love to come out with a piece of business or a connection that could lead to a piece of business. And I think people have to remember that you only need to have one, perhaps, lead. And that by being specific, it's more likely to spark something off in the mind of that other person. Whereas if you're just saying, well, I'm looking for anybody who wants a new logo, anyone that wants business portraits, it just doesn't narrow it down enough.
Yeah.
So that would be, and then at the end, I like people to do a proper wrap up. So, so they say it, I'm Barbara Hodgson from Your Business Matters. And perhaps if they have got not everyone's comfortable with this, but if they have got some kind of tagline that goes at the end to put that in, and it's a nice finish. And actually, one of the interesting things for me is watching meetings where perhaps people don't do the beginning and end bit. And it does have an effect on the listeners. It's much, much more like a mini presentation in some ways, that 60 seconds, if you have it. And it makes a nice clear divide before then the person that's chairing moves on to the next person. So yeah, 10 seconds for your introduction, 40 seconds in the middle for a little bit of background and who you're looking for, and then you wrap up to make the minute.
Yeah, okay, that's good. And I like the way you're describing it, because actually a couple of things that were just stuck in my mind there. So first of all, being very specific about what you're looking for, because actually if you're too broad, the people in the room, bear in mind, they've probably got to listen to 20 or 30 other pitches as well. They need something very specific to tag on to, so they know to look for that sort of potential client for you going forward. And the other thing that when you were talking about showing some work that you've done recently, so maybe if you're a graphic designer, an illustration of something you've drawn up or something, what you're doing at that point is actually you're explaining what your business does and what benefits the client will get from working with you, but actually doing it in a very graphical way. It's actually really appealing to the visual. So in two elements, you're explaining what you do, but also using two different ways of doing it. You've got the hearing, so you're talking about it, they can listen to what you're telling them, but also they've got the visual to back that up, all of which of course is going to make it much more likely to stick with them as well, isn't it?
Yes, and you're absolutely right. It is about selling the benefit. It's about showing the benefits of using your product or your service that's going to help that other person. Yeah. And that's really key.
Yeah, and then of course the bit in the middle when you're talking about something you've done recently, that's when you're basically confirming that you know how to do the work, you're qualified to do it, and you've got the experience to do it as well.
And you can use, if you're attending a networking group on a regular basis, you can use that as a build-up so that people understand the whole business. Because, okay, if you are a weekly networking group, you've probably got about 50 weeks, you might have 2 weeks holiday, so 50 minutes to explain your business. That's not a huge length of time. If you're in a monthly group, you've only got 10 to 12 opportunities. 12 minutes is not a lot to explain the business.
Yeah.
You can use the minute to build up a picture to some degree, but you also then have to remember that you need to meet those people outside of the meeting to really, really understand about the business.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, some of those people you're going to actually meet them before you've done your pitch in any case, aren't you? Because you'll meet some people when you enter the room, when you're having coffee or biscuits or whatever before the meeting. Then you'll do your pitch, and then obviously you've got the wrap up time afterwards as well. So you've got two instances when you're going to be talking to other people in the room.
You have, but then going on and then meeting them later in the month to then further learn about that business, where each person is talking about their business. That's where real serious business relationships can kick off. And people buy from people. So actually really getting to know them and, as much as they want to share with you about their business, about themselves, really cements that relationship. And it's more likely that you will then receive something from them once you've really got to know them. And then obviously for you, if you learn about that business, you're in a much, much better position to recognize opportunities when they present themselves that you can then pass on to that person.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, obviously, COVID-19 at the moment has changed the way we network. So much of it is not in a room face to face as we've been used to historically. And I guess with what you were doing with Women in Business was very much face to face for most of the 12, well, all of the 12 years. So with things changing and the advent of the online networking meetings, what needs to change in the way that you approach the meeting and the way you run them?
I think there's still some elements that remain common. So, the preparation part of setting yourself a goal, understanding what the agenda is still there. But I think the challenge of online networking lies in some ways with the informal types of groups, because you can't just walk up to somebody and introduce yourself online. So I think picking your meeting is important, but I think understanding how the meeting is going to be run. And also I would suggest that people before the meeting, if there are particular businesses they want to be introduced to, they let the organizer know, so that if they do things like breakout rooms, they could pop the person into that room. But I think sometimes you're very much in the hands of the organizer when you're online,
Yeah.
and they're actually doing it and facilitating that discussion. I think that is the big difference with online networking. Of course, we are in a situation as well where people can still meet with people, as long as they feel happy to do so, socially distance on a one-to-one basis. So I think that I would advise people, if people were nervous about joining an online meeting and that could feel more daunting than actually stepping into a room, that they tell the organizer that, and perhaps even arrange just a short Zoom call with them. Perhaps they could arrange for them to be in touch with a member who may want to meet them before the online meeting, but in a face-to-face environment, so they felt, very comfortable. But the thing I would say to organisers is that when you have people arriving in your Zoom room, make sure that you tell the rest of the meeting that we have a new person amongst us, and members that they remember to breathe in between their speech and not just talk. Let everybody have the say. It's much harder to interact, I think, in an informal setting on a Zoom meeting or Teams or however it's going to be done than in a face-to-face. I think once then you get into the structure of the meeting, I can't talk for anybody else, but my meetings run very much online as they do offline. Then you're much into a more comfortable zone with the chair kind of facilitating and making sure that everybody's involved in timekeeping on their behalf. Does that answer your question, Rupert?
Yeah, I was just going to ask, how do you make sure then, as an attendee, how do you make sure that you get the maximum impact from your time at the networking event, bearing in mind that you won't be able to go around and, if you like, for want of a better term, work the room before you do your pitch?
I think a lot of them are using breakout rooms, so that helps. I think setting some objectives for yourself also helps. So if you want to meet particular businesses and you can see them on screen, you have got a chat button, so you could arrange for some individual time with them as well. But I do think you're very much in the hands of the organizer and how it's run online, which is the tricky part. Part which is distinguishing groups as well in terms of how they're being run.
And the other thing, of course, you can do on a networking, particularly online, if you're on something like this on Zoom, you can chat to people in the background as well. Zoom gives you the facility to do that. I'm always slightly nervous, actually, about approaching somebody as a chat and saying, "Oh, really love to have a chat with you. I think we could do some work together." It's one of those invites that never quite feels right to me.
And I think the other hard thing about the chat is that if you are chatting, especially in an informal meeting while people are doing their minutes, you're not listening to what's being said.
That's the problem.
It's a big distraction. I think the chat box is really great when people arrive into the first part, which is, usually informal. So they can do if other people are talking and they can't get a word in, or two people are engaged in a conversation, they can use the chat box just to actually recognize people in the room, perhaps, and just say, "Oh, hi, Paul, we've met before," or whatever. "Nice to see you again, Fiona," or whatever. So that can be a way to kind of break the ice and also not feel like, I'm going to use the word Billy no mates. You've arrived at an online meeting, nobody's spoken to you yet, but you can use the chat box to actually make those connections. But I don't advocate using the chat box when the minutes are going on or people are talking as a whole meeting, because otherwise, as I say, you're just not listening to what people are looking for. And you wouldn't do that in a face-to-face meeting. You wouldn't sit there while people are doing a minute and then have a chat to the person next to you. You would be listening. So I think that people need to remember that chat box needs to be used smartly as well. And I think one great thing actually that happened in a networking meeting for me recently was I didn't realize you could save the chat information.
Oh, yeah.
The organizer just explained to the room, does everybody know how to save chat? And he or she went through it. And I thought that was really good. They made sure that the contact details that were being put within that, people were then able to access after the meeting.
Yeah, which of course means that you've only got to make a note of the people you want to talk to during the meeting, and then just take the action afterwards to follow up with them once you pick their details up from the chat box.
Yeah, in my room, in my groups, we hold all of the contact information in a set system that everybody has access to, which means, and in the business room, you actually prepare before you get into the room, so you know who's going to be there in advance, you know what they're looking for, and you've got contact details as well. So that, for me, that helps. And maybe I'm saying this because I'm not a good multitasker when it comes to Zoom. So I find it quite challenging to run a meeting, watch the chat box, and then notice all the contact things going on, you know. I like to focus on what's being said and then pick that detail up later.
Yeah, I think you and me in the same camp then. But I can't multitask, but I just put it down to being a bloke. So
I'll put it down to age.
Yeah, I've got that one as well, I'm afraid. Never mind. So, Barbara, of course, we've talked about where we are today and obviously COVID-19. So, do you think networking is going to change substantially in the future? So, at some point, of course, the COVID restrictions are going to be removed and we're going to be back to business as normal. But what do you think the new normal is going to look like?
I think the new normal could be a mixture. I think that it depends how long we go on. The proof of whether online networking is as effective, I don't think we've got there yet. We simply don't know. But I envisage a future where there's a combination. There are certainly, you know, when people go back to face-to-face networking, that time and travel element is really going to hit them. Because, you know, now you can waltz up to your networking meeting, you know, once you've cleaned your teeth, gone to the downstairs office and turned your computer on, and obviously that's not going to happen when it's back face to face. And I think my members tell me that they can't wait to go back to a face to face meeting, but I think some people will seek that online connection as well. And I think there could be a lot of people that do one-to-ones remotely now, rather than going and meeting for a coffee. But I think it's going to be a mixture of different formats. I think some people absolutely hate online networking, and I know that I know a substantial number of businesses that, you know, they'd rather just take a back seat in some ways. But for me, it's still important that you've got to do some networking. You've got to keep your business name out there. So for people that have done that, I would just say, come and just find the right online group for you. But for the future, I think it's going to be a mixture. But I also think people really want to go back face to face.
Yeah, be interested to see how it plays out. Actually, it's a good point, because the travel, typically, if you go to a face-to-face meeting, you're probably talking about an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours for the meeting itself. Once you've turned up, done the initial coffees and introductions, the formal part of the meeting, if there is one. So, and then of course you've got travel time, which could easily be another hour and a half. You've almost taken away half your day in travel, which, of course, I've spoken to people who've literally bounced out of one networking meeting and straight into another one while we've been online, and all over the country. I mean, there's I'm hearing stories of people joining networking meetings from in the UK, from the States, and Asia as well. So it's suddenly become truly global.
I think that when you look at it from a nation or, you know, cross-country viewpoint, it'll depend as well how the businesses are going to look after their customers. So it's, you know, it's for some businesses that might want to be UK-wide, they're going to have to think, once they find customers in those regions, how are they then going to service them and give them that customer care. So I think if you're going to join it from a much larger geographical basis, you've got to kind of think your complete customer journey through and how you're going to manage that as a business. I don't think I saw at the beginning of lockdown, you know, everybody was networking with everybody online. There was huge volumes, and in our groups, people can visit other groups if their slots aren't locked out, and that was very popular. But I think it's slowed down now. People are getting into their rhythm, their routine, their new norm, and they're picking the effective networking groups and then bringing it down.
So being a little more selective about which groups they join, but making sure those are the groups that get them the most benefit. And actually, I suppose that the mass networking to start with, when the restrictions first came in March, is partly the effect of people not knowing which are the most effective groups to be in at that time.
And I think a little bit of just probably panic. You know, this was a situation, a little bit of panic. We need to get businesses. We have got this opportunity. Let's go get it. But obviously, even if that networking event was a free event, it's still their time that they're spending.
Yeah.
I think people have evaluated where they feel comfortable and they feel they're going to get their return on. And I also think that in the first couple of months, obviously, we were completely locked down. Whereas now that, you know, I know there's some variations regionally on meeting outside, you know, meeting with other households, but I think now people are much more comfortable about doing some face-to-face external meetings than they were back then.
Yeah. Okay. So, Barbara, thanks for talking to us today. It's been great, and loads of useful information in there as well. Before we go, you better explain to people how they make contact with you now as Your Business Matters.
Yeah, people can email me, Barbara, at yourbusinessmatters.co, or they can give me a call on 07504 946 585, or visit the website www.yourbusinessmatters.co. We do offer a free 20-minute chat with anybody if they want to be pointed in the right direction in terms of suppliers, or if they've got an issue they want to discuss, or if they want any networking advice. I'm more than happy, you know, to have a chat and see how me and my huge network can actually help them.
Excellent, thank you very much. So if there's 3 things people should take away from this morning's conversation, what would they be?
Don't be frightened of networking. I think the first one would be. The second one is know why you're networking. Don't just tick list. And 3 would be set yourself some goals about it.
That's great. Barbara, thank you very much for your time today. It's been lovely talking to you. Barbara Hodgson from Your Business Matters. Thank you.
Thanks, Rupert.